Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a piece of audio that is, well, it's honestly fascinating and incredibly raw.
Oh, absolutely. And highly practical, too.
Yeah. So, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a recorded lecture. This was given to university students in Kenya, specifically young adults at the University of Nairobi and Kenya science campuses.
All right.
And the topic on the table is preventing gender-based violence, or GBV. But right off the bat, before we jump in, a quick note to you, our listeners.
Yeah, this is an important disclaimer.
Right. Today's source material tackles highly sensitive, socially charged topics regarding gender dynamics, domestic violence, and trauma. As always, our goal here isn't to take a side or endorse specific viewpoints.
No.
We're simply here to unpack the raw perspectives and the frameworks presented in this really unique lecture.
And unique is definitely the right word here, because this isn't your standard dry academic lecture.
Not even close.
Right. Instead of a typical, legal breakdown or a sociological review of domestic disputes, this source is a blunt, boots-on-the-ground guide to early detection.
Yeah.
The speaker, a man named Dancan, he doesn't spend his time talking about what to do after things go wrong. He focuses entirely on reading the red flags before getting trapped in a dangerous situation. It's a masterclass in preemptive self-defense.
Okay, let's unpack this because the information he shares is surprisingly universally applicable. Whether you are actively dating, whether you are mentoring a younger sibling, or whether you're just looking to better understand human behavior.
And the warning signs of toxicity.
Exactly. This is essential listening.
To really set the stage for you, imagine the room. This lecture took place just ahead of International Women's Day.
Right.
The audience is packed with young university students who are at that age where they're just starting to navigate serious, potentially lifelong relationships.
You can almost hear the nervous, attentive energy in the room on the recording.
You totally can. And what stands out immediately is the underlying philosophy of the presentation. Society often talks about mediating domestic disputes or going to couples counseling.
Or waiting for legal justice after an assault has already occurred.
Exactly. But Duncan's entire approach bypasses that. He is teaching these students about preemptive strikes, identifying potential abusers during the very early dating phase and walking away immediately.
He actually opens the lecture by playing a song, which is an interesting choice. It's a 1996 track by Stevie Wonder and Babyface called How Come, How Long.
Yeah, that was powerful.
It really is. It's a socially conscious song about domestic violence, and he uses it to highlight this tragic reality that society often just looks on. We see the bruises, we hear the fights through the apartment walls, and we ignore the obvious signs of abuse in relationships until it's too late.
Right.
The whole point of his talk, and the reason he's standing in front of these students, is to teach them how not to ignore the signs when they're small.
And to jolt the audience to attention, he immediately moves from the emotional weight of that song into a very sobering data reality check. He doesn't sugarcoat the environment these young people are walking into.
No, he really doesn't. The data he presents is stark. He shares statistics from FIDA,
which is the Federation of Women Lawyers in Kenya. Right?
Yes, exactly. They do extensive pro bono legal work and research there. According to their data on reported domestic cases, 79.2% of those cases are perpetrated by men.
Wow.
And 14.6% by women. Now, Dancan makes it very clear that men are absolutely victims too.
Right. He shares that harrowing personal anecdote.
Yeah, about a male friend of his who was actually stabbed in the hand by his fiancée right before their wedding. So he absolutely acknowledges that complex reality, but he tells the room that his main focus for this particular talk is on protecting the young women sitting in front of him, simply due to those overwhelming statistics.
And the severe physical disparity in most of these conflicts.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is how he immediately follows up that heavy reality check. You can imagine the tension in the room after hearing that nearly 80% of reported abuse is committed by men.
Oh, for sure. You'd be terrified.
Right. It'd be so easy for the young women in the audience to feel a sense of despair, or to view every single man as a potential threat. But Dancan pivots to what he calls the 84-16 rule. This is just a brilliant use of data to reframe the narrative and actually reduce panic.
I literally had to rewind the audio when he shared this next data point because it completely reframed the way we usually talk about this.
He pulls from the KDHS, the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey.
Okay.
For context, this is a massive, rigorous pulse check on the nation's population. When you query the data across the general population, only 16% of men are actually implicated as abusers in these domestic cases.
Which means 84% of men are non-abusers. They're safe.
Yes. And the psychological relief of that statistic is massive. He's telling these young female students, you do not have to be terrified of the world. You don't have to view every man who asks you out to coffee as a monster in disguise.
That's such a comforting thought, honestly.
It really is. Your mission isn't to hide. Your mission is simply to weed out those specific 2 out of 10 men. You don't fear the 8. You just become incredibly vigilant about identifying the 2.
So how do you identify those 2 out of 10? This is where the lecture shifts from theory into incredibly practical advice. Dancan enthusiastically walks the students through 3 life-saving dating questions.
These are just so good.
They really are. He says you should ask these early in a relationship to gauge who you're dealing with. And we have to talk about these because the psychology behind them is so sharp.
The sequencing of the questions is what makes them so effective. Let's look at the first one.
Okay, question number 1. What's your opinion of men who hit their partners? It sounds simple, almost too obvious, right? But what you're looking for here is genuine, reflexive disgust. If the person hesitates, if they try to make excuses, or if they blame the victim, saying things like, well, it's terrible, but sometimes women provoke men.
That is an immediate flashing red flag.
Absolutely.
Because it reveals their baseline for acceptable behavior. If there is any gray area in their mind about whether violence is justified by annoyance, you are seeing a crack in their foundation.
Then we get to question number 2, which is just wild to imagine in practice. The question is, have you ever hit a woman?
Huh, yeah.
Now picture this. You're on a 3rd date, you're having a nice dinner or grabbing coffee, and you just casually drop, so have you ever hit a woman? It is so jarring.
It is entirely jarring, and that is the genius of it. It's designed to be a curveball. You drop this into a casual conversation specifically to catch them off guard. With the second question, the actual words they say matter far less than their body language.
Because they're probably going to say no regardless, right? I mean, who would say yes to that?
Exactly. But you are watching their microexpressions. Do they get intensely defensive? Do they get angry that you even had the audacity to ask? Or do they try to turn the question back on you to make you feel guilty for ruining the mood?
Oh, that deflection.
That deflection is a classic manipulation tactic. Someone from the safe 84% might be surprised by the question, but they won't make you feel crazy for prioritizing your safety.
Okay, so that leads us to the final question, number 3. What is the one reason that would make you hit a woman?
This raises such an important question about boundaries, and Dancan provides a really fascinating caveat here. A safe man will initially say, nothing. There is no reason.
Right.
But if you press them, there is one and only one acceptable answer to this question: life-protecting self-defense. Dancan mentions a conversation he actually had with his own son.
Oh, right, I remember this.
He told him that if you're facing a lethal threat, say, someone comes at you with a knife, regardless of their gender, you neutralize the threat to save your own life. But aside from immediate life-protecting self-defense, any other answer is a glaring red flag.
So if they mention disrespect or finding you cheating or extreme anger...
Those are not justifications for violence. Ever.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. One of the most crucial warnings he gives isn't even about how a partner treats you directly. It's a behavioral tell that he calls the wall-punching warning.
Property destruction. This is a behavioral pattern that society frequently misdiagnoses. If a partner punches a wall, knocks over a chair, or shatters a glass when they're frustrated by a bad day at work or a terrible commute, people often brush that off.
Right, we say they're just venting or blowing off steam.
Exactly. But Dancan is unequivocal here. You can hear his tone shift in the audio. He gets dead serious. He states clearly that property destruction is never just venting. It is always a preview of future violence against their partner.
He shares a story to back this up. He talks about a friend whose wedding was called off literally the day before the ceremony.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The groom had slapped the bride during a highly stressful argument about last-minute wedding planning. Now, imagine the immense social pressure there. Both families are there, the money is spent, the caterers are booked. Everyone was pressuring them to just mediate, calm down, and go through with it.
Of course. The pressure would be immense.
But the bride absolutely refused. She told them she had just seen a preview of her future, and she was out.
That takes incredible courage. And what we understand from the psychology of escalation is that the pattern always starts small. First, it's punching a wall. Then the triggers get smaller. Maybe it's at a burnt dinner instead of a lost job. Eventually, the wall is no longer enough. and the partner becomes the target of that physical rage.
Now, let me play devil's advocate for a second, because this brings up something that I know a lot of people wrestle with. Duncan talks about the "I can fix him" fallacy. He's very blunt that if an abuser has childhood trauma, like maybe they grew up seeing their own mother abused, which normalized the violence for them, you still have to leave. But doesn't that sound kind of cold? We're taught to have empathy, right? We're taught to support our partners when they're struggling with deep wounds.
It's a fantastic point, and it's a trap so many empathetic, caring people fall into. But Duncan counters this by drawing a hard line between empathy and self-preservation. Deeply ingrained trauma takes professional intervention. It takes years of therapy, and sometimes, as Duncan notes, a miracle to unravel.
Yeah.
The harsh reality he presents to these young students is this. A 20-something's job is not to be an unpaid psychologist to a violent partner. Your job is to survive. You can have immense sympathy for what someone went through in their childhood, but you cannot sacrifice your physical safety on the altar of their unhealed trauma. You have to secure your own oxygen mask first and find someone from that 84% of safe individuals.
He also tackles this modern glamorization of toxic relationships, which I thought was fascinating. We live in an era of reality TV and social media algorithms that constantly push relationship drama. It creates this narrative that if a relationship isn't full of screaming matches and dramatic reconciliations, it isn't passionate.
It's so damaging.
It really is. And he calls out the Hollywood concept of a single destined soulmate, too. People stay in abusive situations because they genuinely believe, well, this is my one soulmate. If I leave, I'll be alone forever.
He dismantles that myth by pulling from a very different source material, the historical biblical story of Jacob, Leah, and Rachel.
Oh, yeah. Break this down for us.
It's an interesting analogy. Jacob was passionately, intensely in love with Rachel. The romance was sky high. But through a complex series of events, he was tricked into marrying Leah first. He didn't have that fiery, dramatic, romantic love for Leah, but he had a duty to her. He had a commitment. The insight Duncan extracts from this is that commitment, duty, and mutual respect often outlast fleeting dramatic romance. A healthy relationship is built on peace. It's built on harmony, not fear, not control, and certainly not constant dramatic highs and lows.
He says something so simple but profound. If you feel like you are walking on eggshells around your partner, constantly worried about setting them off, that isn't love. That is fear.
Precisely. And what I found most revealing about this entire audio wasn't just Duncan's lecture, but how the students reacted to it.
Oh, the Q&A portion.
Yes, the Q&A is incredibly dynamic. You could hear the students pushing back, testing these frameworks with really tough real-world scenarios.
It is fantastic. The first question came from a female student, and you could hear the earnestness in her voice. She essentially asked, okay, we know about the 16% who are abusers, but what can the 84% of good men actually do to help?
And Duncan's response was a phenomenal call to action.
It really was.
He turned his attention directly to the young men in the room and told them they must hold their peers accountable. If you know a guy in your social circle, on your sports team, or in your dorm who is abusing his partner, you have to call him out.
He didn't mince words either. He called abusers cowards who only attack people physically smaller than them.
Right. He urged the good men to strip away the social respect these abusers enjoy. Do not welcome them in your circles. Do not laugh at their jokes. Social exile is a powerful deterrent.
Then there was another question that, honestly, I almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but Duncan took it very seriously. A student asked if it was okay for a woman to intentionally provoke a man just to test his anger limits and see what he would do.
You can hear the disbelief in Duncan's voice when he answers this, but his warning is dead serious. He points out that life is hard enough. People are dealing with stressful jobs, economic pressure, family illnesses. Men who fall into that safe 84% category value peace above almost anything else when they come home.
Makes total sense.
Right. If you artificially introduce drama and provocation just to test a good man, you are going to drive him away. He will simply leave to find someone who offers a peaceful harbor.
Another student brought up a really tough nuance, continuing that thread of empathy we talked about earlier. They asked, what if the red flags and the extreme jealousy, the property destruction, are directly caused by a diagnosed mental illness?
And this is where we see that unwavering boundary again. Duncan acknowledged the complex reality of mental health struggles, but he stated firmly that even if the toxicity is tied to an illness, it remains a red flag for your physical safety.
Yeah.
You can advise that person to get professional help. You can even help them find a doctor, but you must still remove yourself from the romantic relationship. Your physical safety is the non-negotiable baseline.
Finally, a student asks about the legal side of things. How effective are the laws and policies surrounding domestic violence?
Duncan was very pragmatic here. He noted that legal avenues absolutely exist. In Kenya, for instance, there is the P3 form, which is the official medical examination report used by police for physical assault prosecution.
Okay.
There are also organizations offering pro bono legal services, like FIDA, which we mentioned earlier, and there are safe houses, like the Gender Violence Recovery Center and the Kenya Women and Children's Wellness Center.
Mm-hmm.
But he was brutally honest. The justice system moves very slowly. Often, by the time the law intervenes, the damage is severe. Therefore, while the law is there for the aftermath, early detection and walking away are your ultimate shields.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Let's distill this into the practical takeaways you can apply to your own life right now or share with someone you care about. First and foremost, trust your intuition.
This is critical. The human body has a built-in alarm system. Think about how a lie detector works. The body reacts to stress with a dry mouth, a raised pulse, maybe sweating. Your intuition works similarly when sensing danger. If your gut tells you something is wrong, even if the person looks perfect on paper and says all the right things, obey that instinct.
Second, watch the body language. When you ask those hard dating questions, listen to their words, sure, but pay closer attention to their delivery. Are they deflecting? Are they trying to make you feel overly sensitive for bringing it up? That is manipulation, plain and simple.
Totally.
Third, observe their outside relationships. Duncan points out a massive tell, how a man treats his mother. Disrespect, verbal abuse, or constant belittling of a mother almost always translates to disrespect for a romantic partner down the line.
And here's a takeaway that I think is a brilliant mental model for anyone listening, regardless of where you are in life. Duncan calls it the time travel mindset.
Oh, I love this part.
Right. He tells the young students to imagine themselves as time travelers from the future who have journeyed back to their own youth, specifically to make the right choices. He tells them, you are literally living in your past right now.
Wow.
The decisions you make today, who you choose to date, what toxic behaviors you tolerate, are writing the history that your future self will have to live with. It is a profound way to force yourself to think long-term instead of just seeking short-term gratification.
I love that framing. You are literally living in your past right now. That is definitely one of the most memorable quotes from the audio. There's another line he uses that just echoes in the room. Property destruction is always a preview of future violence against you.
And we can't forget his direct challenge to the abusers themselves. What kind of a man are you that actually beats up a woman? You're a coward.
And finally, a classic truth that really summarizes his entire philosophy of early detection. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, you need to believe them the first time.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it's incredible to see how a seemingly standard university lecture provided such sharp, life-saving frameworks for human behavior. Whether you are currently dating, whether you've been married for decades, or whether you're just navigating complex friendships or workplace dynamics, the boundaries you set early on will define the peace you experience later.
Exactly. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. And you do not have to sacrifice your well-being to fix someone else's brokenness.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. Throughout the source material, Duncan briefly noted that abusers will almost always try to isolate their victims from friends and family early on. They do this so that the victim has no support network when the abuse finally escalates.
Right, that isolation tactic.
Exactly. Take a look at your own social circles right now. Are you maintaining your independent support networks? And just as importantly, are you acting as a safe, connected harbor for a friend who might be ignoring the early red flags of a 16%er?
That is a vital question to ask ourselves. Keep your eyes open, trust your instincts, and protect your peace. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.